The Louisville Cardinals go on the road for the first time this weekend. They have a chance to boost their college football playoff resume and continue to rise up the national rankings with a win over Notre Dame. We'll break it down on today's episode of Locked On Louisville.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what is going on, everyone? Welcome into this Thursday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. As always, I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I want to take this time to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville, free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Just a reminder, today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. It's all about Notre Dame preview on this Thursday edition of the show. We discuss what is at stake for Notre Dame, how the Cardinals can boost their college football playoff resume and continue to rise up the rankings. It is the first road game of the season, the first ranked opponent that Louisville will face. We'll discuss the keys to victory. A lot of that centered around containing Riley Leonard and making Notre Dame throw the football. We'll also identify the players to watch on both sides for your Louisville Cardinals. This is a pretty intriguing matchup. As I mentioned, a lot of firsts for the early season. It's the first road game. It's the first ranked opponent. Louisville will go to South Bend to play the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. 3:30 kickoff on Saturday. It's on Peacock, so just a heads up, if you don't have that subscription, it's probably wise to go ahead and just do the 1 month fee. I'm not sure what that is any longer. I do have Peacock and have had it for quite some time to watch the English Premier League for soccer, but I don't, I don't know what that fee looks like. That's probably bad that I don't, but it is what it is. So it's unfortunate, but just sort of the way the world is when it comes to streaming in 2024 is that you're going to have a couple of games on non-traditional networks like Pittsburgh last year, Notre Dame this season. But nonetheless, that shouldn't affect how Louisville plays. And you hope that Louisville comes into this game ready, prepared, and really takes it to Notre Dame. Notre Dame's a pretty interesting team. They beat a Texas A&M team to start the season. A&M currently is, I want to say they're 3-1, but the 3 wins were over Florida, Bowling Green, and McNeese. So it's not like they really have set the world on fire. Notre Dame did go into College Station to get that win. They beat Purdue pretty handily. Purdue's really not all that good. And then they beat Miami of Ohio 28-3. Their one loss came to Northern Illinois. Obviously, that took the college football landscape by storm. Northern Illinois then immediately got ranked. They just lost their first game of the weekend on Saturday. So that is a pretty interesting that's a pretty interesting thing to see, is that like Georgia Tech, but maybe a little bit on a lesser scale, it's just hard to tell how good of a team this Notre Dame squad is, because there's always the narrative that, well, Notre Dame is always overrated to start the season. Now, I'm not sure. Maybe they're not a top 10 team right now, or maybe they're not top 5 for certain, but I would argue that they're definitely a top 25 team. So their current ranking sitting at number 16, I think it's pretty justifiable. I mean, they've beaten Texas A&M. They've handled business outside of Northern Illinois. So them being at 16 is pretty interesting. What's even more intriguing to me is that the Cardinals leapfrogged Notre Dame. Louisville was at number 19 coming into the game against Georgia Tech. They beat the Yellow Jackets. Now they're at number 15. They have leapfrogged Notre Dame. They didn't do that in the coaches poll. In the coaches poll, Louisville was 17, Notre Dame is 14. But I found it pretty interesting that they jumped over the Fighting Irish in terms of AP poll points. Louisville has 7 more at the time. They were one of the largest risers in the top 25 outside of Michigan and outside of Illinois. Well, Clemson as well. But nonetheless, you get the gist. What is at stake? It's a segment that we like to do before every preview because it paints the picture in terms of context, a certain opponent, during the certain time in which this game is played. Louisville is 3-0, 1-0 in conference play. What is at stake with a win for Louisville? Well, simply put, it is boosting that college football playoff resume. And I know that the natural rebuttal to this will be that, well, you look at who Notre Dame has to play for the rest of the season, and how does this really boost the resume if you give them their third loss? Well, if you look at Notre Dame's rest of their schedule, USC looks like the only tough game, like really only tough game. They play that game on the road. They'll play actually, it's pretty weird. I didn't realize this. That is their final road game. Like, that's their final true road game. It's the last game of the season. Like, this starts a stretch of them playing. I would imagine all these at home. I guess they could be at a neutral site. But it looks like a lot of these are either home games or classified as home games. So they've got Stanford, Georgia Tech, Navy, Florida State, Virginia, Army, and USC. That is a fairly easy schedule compared to like years past, and there's a very good chance that Notre Dame could end the season 10-2 or 9-3. So back to the point, if you were to beat this ranked Notre Dame team on the road, you're boosting your college football playoff resume automatically because it looks good. Now, regardless of how you personally feel about Notre Dame, the name still holds weight. So the win becomes more significant, like it did last season. It was a little bit different than last season because that was the sixth game of the year. You got the bowl eligibility and you were proving yourself more. But this does give you an opportunity to continue to prove yourselves. You proved that you can handle your first test of the season against a Georgia Tech team that was ready to play, and they wanted to win this game really badly. So you were able to get that win, but with a win at Notre Dame, you take things a little bit of a step forward, right? Like, proving yourself is not just a 1 week phenomenon. Like, you have to, it's a cumulative crescendo or decrescendo toward the end of the season, and you just have to continually prove yourself week in, week out. But it becomes more critical this week because I say all eyes are going to be on this game, but I don't know how many people are truly going to download the Peacock subscription, those that aren't fans of either team that don't have the subscription already. So that is something to focus on. But at the very least, a lot of attention will be given to this game because anytime Notre Dame loses, it's a story. It is a story. And what better way for them to lose than to lose at home to the Louisville Cardinals? Now, this has been a place that Louisville really hasn't felt the home field advantage. They haven't felt the pressure by the opposing fan base. They went up to Notre Dame in 2014. Freshman quarterback Reggie Bonifant helped Louisville become victorious. You look at the other matchups. Well, the only other matchup that Louisville played, it was either I think it was 2020 or 2021. I want to say it was 2021, but I could be mistaken. Very well could have been 2020, but nonetheless, it was 2020. It was a 12-7 game, like really bad offensive game. It was extremely challenging to watch that game, but nonetheless, they kept it close. So I say all that to point out that even when Notre Dame has a good team and they play Louisville at home, it doesn't ever feel like Louisville is out of the game. I know it's a small sample size, but it just reiterates this. I won't call it a rivalry game, but it's becoming one of the more notable matchups for Notre Dame, in their schedule year in, year out when these two teams play. With a loss, however, you look at what's at stake with a loss, right? It's sort of just the opposite. Now, it doesn't have any conference implications, so I think that losing to Notre Dame, a ranked Notre Dame on the road, isn't the end of the world. It would suck, but it wouldn't make Louisville have to throw the towel in on the season because they're still undefeated in conference play. Like, it does hurt the national ranking. It does not help the college football playoff resume, and it gives them their first loss. It makes it to where Louisville doesn't have as much margin for error from losses, because if Louisville doesn't go 10-2, they're probably not making the playoff as an at-large. And it puts it to where you would basically have to win your conference championship game to get to the college football playoff. So that's the main thing here, is that what's at stake is that both ways. I do think that this is the first time all season, because Louisville is going to be an underdog in this matchup. There's more to gain with a loss than there is to lose with a loss. Or, I'm sorry, there's more to gain with a win than there is to lose with a loss. And that's been flip-flop for the first 3 games of the season, right? Because Louisville has been at least a touchdown favorite in all 3 games. And sometimes double-digit favorites in all 3 games. But going to be a pretty interesting one. And I hope that Louisville is able to come out prepared. I hope that they come in focused and they're ready to just do what they can to stay undefeated. Let's get a little bit more specific, though. What are the 3 keys to victory for the Cardinals? A lot of it centers around Notre Dame quarterback Riley Leonard. We'll discuss the 3 keys to victory when we come back on this Thursday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a large return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. If you go to FanDuel.com, you can look at all the all the odds for this upcoming weekend's games. Louisville is a underdog in this one. Be sure to check out that. Be sure to check out the prop bets if you want to place a same-game parlay. But nonetheless, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first ever $5 bet. Once again, that is on America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel.com. Thanks again, Cardinal fans, for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. And also, just a heads up, if you haven't been listening to the past couple of episodes, I am currently out of town for a work conference. This is a pre-recorded show being released on this Thursday morning. So anything new that has happened from basically Monday on, it won't likely be covered on the show until next week if it needs to be revisited at that time. So only a Sunday night, a Tuesday, and a Thursday episode this week. I apologize for the inconvenience, but this is something that I tried to plan for. So we kind of overcompensated and had a little bit more content to begin the month. But when I get back on Friday night, it is business as usual for the show. So 3 keys to victory for the Cardinals. And I hate to sound like a broken record, but I feel like a lot of this is similar to what the keys to victory were for the Georgia Tech game. And number 1 is really similar. It is forcing Notre Dame into passing downs. Like, personally, for me, I think game planning for Haynes King is a little bit more challenging than game planning for Riley Leonard. Now, don't take that as me saying that Riley Leonard is not a good player. Riley Leonard is really good, especially when you force him, or you allow him. I should clarify. You allow him to run the football. I mean, he has had a fantastic season doing just that. I mean, you look at the statistical numbers for Leonard. He's got 322 yards. He's averaging 7 yards per carry, and he leads the team with 6 touchdowns overall. This is a rushing offense that is pretty good. It's 18th in the country. Like, they really focus on running the football with Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, 2 really good running backs. The main focus here is putting Notre Dame into passing downs because Northern Illinois laid out the blueprint. When you sell out to defend the run and you load the box, Notre Dame has still shown issues with being able to throw the football, but that is assuming that you can stop the run. So to make Notre Dame uncomfortable, you have to force them into passing downs, 3rd and long, 2nd and long. You have to limit the early down yardage gains because if you do, you're putting Riley Leonard in a more uncomfortable situation, having to consistently convert on 3rd and long. And I'll say this, Riley Leonard is not a bad quarterback, but Haynes King is a better thrower. He's probably not as good of a runner as Leonard. Like, Leonard is a better runner, but King is a better thrower. I think that probably helps more for the Cardinals' sake because they're a better team against the rush than they are against the pass. Now, Notre Dame just lost another starting offensive lineman, I think pretty recently for the season. This is coming after they lost their starting left tackle before the season. So the offensive line has got to continually prove themselves, or it has to continually prove themselves. So I think forcing Notre Dame into those passing downs is the main key here, right? Because it puts Notre Dame in situations to where we saw against Northern Illinois how they didn't succeed. So again, you still have to limit the big plays. That's number 2. If you limit the big plays like you didn't do against Georgia Tech, I think you put your defense in a better situation, because I do think Louisville has a good defense, but there are some glaring needs for improvement. And again, defending mobile quarterbacks and limiting big plays are the main thing here. A lot of the big plays that Notre Dame would get would be on the rushing side of things, like Jeremiah Love has a long of 48, Riley Leonard has a long of 50, Jadarian Price has a long of 70. Like this is a very potent rushing attack that is able to break off big chunk yardage runs at any time. So I know that it sounds like Notre Dame being a run-heavy team doesn't really sound all that explosive, but they do a really good job of running behind that good offensive line. They do a fantastic job of finding the holes, and they are really good after contact of getting yardage. So it's polarizingly different. They're the 108th best passing offense, averaging about just under 175 per game. They're the 18th best rushing offense. So it's pretty clear what Marcus Freeman's offense wants to accomplish every time they step foot on the field. For Louisville, defensively, you have to do whatever you can to force Notre Dame into passing downs. You have to do what you did against Duke last season, right? You've got to force Leonard to throw the football. You can't give him much room to be able to get out and scramble. I know that he was facing some injury last season, but it just is what it is. The third key to the game is designed for the offensive side. It's pretty simple. Play a clean game. Wow, that feels like that's pretty that's pretty huge analysis there, but it's true. Last week we watched the Cardinals get multiple plays, multiple first downs erased from the board, wiped off the board because of penalties. Now I know officiating was terrible and not all those penalties were justifiable. But there were some to where Louisville did have some holds. There were some where Louisville did have, I guess, illegal man downfield, or ineligible man downfield, I should say. It's a situation where Louisville has to be better with penalties. And I guess you could say that on the defensive side, right, too. Like, you have to limit the holdings. You just have to play a clean game on offense. Tyler Shough has not had an interception all season. Knock on wood. You hope that doesn't happen again. Louisville has to make it to where they don't turn the ball over. The Cardinals had a safety last week. There were just some mental mistakes, some self-inflicted mistakes that against Georgia Tech you were able to overcome. You have those same mental mistakes, self-inflicted mistakes against Notre Dame. You might not be so lucky, especially on the road. So you have to play a clean game. And what is incorporated in that is also setting the tone at the line of scrimmage, creating the holes for your running backs, and keeping Tyler Shough upright. You look at this Notre Dame defense, they're 16th in total defense, 51st in rushing defense. They're a really good passing defense, 18th overall. They have 9 sacks through 4 games, which isn't setting the world on fire, but it's like 2.25 per game. And it's something that, again, really respectable defense. I know that they lost one of their starting, I think, defensive ends for the season. They're really going through some tough injury luck, sort of like Louisville is, but even more so, with sort of some of the season-ending injuries. So ultimately, keys to victory for Louisville: force Notre Dame into passing downs, make Riley Leonard uncomfortable, limit the big plays for Notre Dame. They do have some really talented receivers if you allow them the space to get open, like Bo Collins. So you just have to limit the big plays and then play a clean game offensively. Limit the penalties, minimize the turnovers, and keep your quarterback upright. If you do all those three things, you're going to put yourself in a very, very good spot to leave South Bend victorious and be 4-0 in the early portion of this season. When we come back, players to watch for. It might sound pretty cliche. All eyes are on Tyler Shough on Saturday in his first road game in a Louisville uniform. We'll break it down on the final episode or final segment of Locked On Louisville. Today's episode of the show is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. It puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. One thing that I like is Josh Allen. His rushing yard numbers are always reasonable, so I always go over on Josh Allen's rushing yards, and I always go under on Dak Prescott's passing yards. The Cowboys just really haven't been all that great this season, so that's been my sort of trend to go with. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONCollege and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONCollege on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to receive the $50 bonus because it's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Cardinal fans, thanks again, like I said, for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. Also, thank you for dealing with the external noise. I'm not sure if you all can hear that, but it feels like someone is cutting the grass literally right outside of my front window. Not sure if he's cutting my grass or if it's a neighbor close by, but nonetheless, it feels like they're cutting the grass literally right by the window. So I'm not sure if you all can hear that at all. If you can, my apologies. If you can't, then just forget I said anything. What you can't forget is that Tyler Shough is the player to watch for this Louisville offense. I know it's cliche. Dalton, I know you said that you don't want to pick quarterbacks for the players to watch for because you think it's lazy, and I do. I truly do. But I also made the qualifying statement that unless the context or situation calls for it. And I think it does because it's your first road game of the season. You're going to South Bend. You're playing a ranked Notre Dame team that has a very respectable defense. This is the type of game that theoretically you brought Tyler Shough to Louisville so that he could help you win it. Like, one of the main focuses was that quarterback play limited the ceiling for this Cardinals team last season. Now you brought in a quarterback that can raise that ceiling. He has the opportunity to prove it. He has the opportunity to also be able to go to the rest of the country and say, hey, look, I know you've been pretty skeptical on me as a quarterback. Look at what I did against Notre Dame. With a good performance against the Fighting Irish, he has a chance to do a lot of good things, not only for his individual recognition, but for the team recognition as well. Because if you end up 4-0 after this week, you feel really good about the first half of the schedule. You obviously will have increased the attention to Tyler Shough. And a lot of that's probably going to be some pretty good discussion, pretty favorable discussion if you are a Louisville fan, right? Because if Louisville wins this, put it this way, I don't think that Louisville is going to be able to win this game if Tyler Shough doesn't play good. Like, I don't think you can have sort of a game manager type game and win this game. Like, I think that this installment of the game is going to be one that he has to be really good throwing the football. At the very least, efficient and effective. So Tyler Shough is the offensive player to watch. Defensively, I'm going to stay lazy. I'm going to be cliche. I'm going to go with the best defender on the team. Ashton Gillotte is the defensive player to watch because of the usage in the way that they are deploying him. Ron English utilized him a lot in the middle of the defensive line. He played a lot on the interior against Georgia Tech, and it kind of hurt the pass rush. Now, Gillotte was held a lot. Like, I've seen pictures to where, one of my guys who is a photographer takes pictures at Louisville games, he showed me a couple pictures of Gillotte literally being put into a chokehold, being held back by, his shoulder pads. Like, it's pretty clear that the officiating was pretty bad. Gillotte was held seemingly more often than not. But with the Notre Dame rushing offense, the opportunity for sacks might not necessarily be as abundant. But one thing that Gillotte did really well on Saturday was defend the run. He helped the Cardinals defend the run. He's been really good at doing that. This is going to be a key game in which he's going to have to be even better. Now, do we see him continually on the interior trying to take away the middle of the field? Or do you see him on the edge so he can try to seal off and not let Riley Leonard or Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price get to the outside and create chunk yardage? That's the main thing here is I think that one of the main things I'm focusing on is what is going to happen with Ashton Gillotte. Like, how is Louisville going to use him? And I think that I would be lying to you if I said that I had the answer. I'm not paid to make these decisions. I would like to see him play a little bit more on the edge, though. Put a little bit more size up in the middle of the trenches and put Gillotte on the outside because I think it's going to help Louisville seal off the edge. So that's the main focus for me, is that I think that this is the type of game that Ashton Gillotte needs to announce his 2024 presence. Past, the first two games, he really didn't play a lot. Third game, he was getting held a good amount to the point to where he really didn't have that much of an impact outside of a couple of plays. So Tyler Shough, Ashton Gillotte, the two players to watch for the Louisville Cardinals. Cardinals on the road, 3:30 kickoff on the Peacock Network up in South Bend. Number 15 traveling to number 16. That is going to wrap up this Thursday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. Everyone have a great start to your weekend. Go Cards. We'll see you right back here in a couple days.